next slide. Thanks, Heather. So these are some of the symptoms of hormonal imbalance. So you can have a look down those women's symptoms: mood swings, hot flushes, night sweats, fatigue, headaches, depressed, anxious, nervous, irritable, tearful, memory lapse, weight gain, premature aging, vaginal dryness, heavy menses, bleeding changes, incontinence, fibrocystic breasts, decreased sex drive, tender breasts, osteoporosis, water retention. You can tell that a lot of women are actually experiencing those kinds of things, but so are all their friends, and so they think that that's quite normal. Similarly for the men, they're having a burned out feeling, they've got abdominal fat, prostate problems, decreased mental clarity, decreased sex drive, increased urinary urge, decreased strength, decreased stamina, difficulty sleeping, decreased urinary flow, irritability, depression, erectile dysfunction, hot flushes, night sweats, poor concentration. Once again, if men were actually speaking to one another, what they'd find is that a lot of them are putting up with those kinds of symptoms, and they don't realise that it's their hormones that are out of balance. So if we can have a look at the next slide. Thanks, Heather. Can we have the next slide, Heather, please? Thank you. So I'm just going to focus a little bit here on women, because for women they are the prominent group that's affected, and what you can see we've done here is we've actually grouped the different kinds of symptoms into mild, moderate and severe, and you will notice here that there are actually a few extras that have turned up. So now you can add in menstrual cramps, alopecia or hair loss, thyroid dysfunction, adrenal gland fatigue, migraines, severe menstrual cramps, heavy periods with clotting, joint and muscle pain, uterine fibroid tumours, endometriosis, fibrocystic breasts, polycystic ovarian syndrome, breast tumours or cancer, infertility, miscarriage, accelerated ageing, autoimmune disorders, insomnia. What we haven't even listed on that page of symptoms is things like other hormonal cancers, not just breast cancer, but prostate cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancer. Then we're looking at things, this is a webinar about men, women and children. We're looking at things like precocious puberty. We're also looking at breast development in men who were never supposed to have breast development, and we're also looking at heart attack, because there's a lot of information now saying that heart attacks, the spasming of the blood vessels and the muscles involved in heart attack and stroke is often due to hormonal imbalance. So, so many symptoms that a lot of people are just putting up with and think is quite normal, and it's really not normal. So if we can go to the next slide, thanks, Heather. So the question next is, how are hormones made? And as you can see from the slide, hormones are actually made from cholesterol. If you look at the cholesterol in the left-hand side, cholesterol forms what we call the mother hormone, which is pregnenolone, and then pregnenolone breaks down into two really important hormones, one being progesterone and one being DHEA. Now what we find is that from progesterone and DHEA, they actually interact with one another in all sorts of different ways to basically produce every other hormone that we have in our bodies. So you can see in the yellow circles down the bottom, you've got estrone, estradiol and estriol. Well, they're all your estrogen hormones. Just above those, you can see testosterone. Down the bottom in the red, you can see cortisol. Over on the right-hand side, you can see dihydrotestosterone, which is very much related to prostate issues and male pattern baldness. You've also got your adrenals coming in there, all sorts of other hormones. So if we could go to the next page, thanks, Heather. So I want to start with some definitions, because people need to understand what these hormones are all about. So the first one I want to talk about is estrogen. Estrogen is the hormone that causes a girl to develop into an adult during puberty. It's the hormone that creates the changes that cause growth of the breasts, hair in the pubic area and under the arms, and the beginning of menstruation. And once puberty is complete, it's estrogen that continues to work, helping control the menstrual cycle, protect bone health and influence fertility. Next slide, thanks, Heather. Then I want people to be aware of these other types of estrogen. So there's one type called xenoestrogen, and that's a very bad kind of estrogen, and it has a very strong influence on the body. And basically xenoestrogens come from any products of industrial and chemical processing that have estrogen-like effects in the body. We've also got phytoestrogens, which are good estrogens, and they have but the problem is they have a much weaker influence in the body than the xenoestrogens. And phytoestrogens are naturally occurring plant nutrients that exert an estrogen-like action on the body. Thanks, Heather. The next slide, please. So the other thing we need to be aware of is estrogen receptors. Every cell has a molecule on the surface that recognises and binds with estrogen, and you can see the little sort of pinky coloured cups there. And if you're looking at the diagrams, the soft purple is your estrogen and the bright red is your xenoestrogen. But the receptors don't recognise that there's a difference, and they will accept any one of those molecules that comes along. And that's why being exposed to all of these xenoestrogens poses a problem, because it's the xenoestrogens that get into the receptors and affect the cells in a negative way. Next slide, thanks, Heather. So other definitions is progesterone. Progesterone is a really good hormone, and that's the hormone that we want to have lots of. There are things called natural progesterone, and that's a form of progesterone that's bioidentical to the hormone that's naturally produced in the body, and it has no undesirable side effects. But unfortunately, there are also things called progestins and progestogens that are not good for us. They're quite bad for our systems, and most doctors don't realise that they actually think that progesterone and progestin and progestogen are exactly the same, and they're not. Progestogen and progestins are synthetic progesterones, and they have the same effect on progesterone receptors as the xenoestrogens do, and they have very undesirable side effects, which we'll look at shortly. Next slide, thanks, Heather. So what undesirable side effects are we talking about? Now, these side effects that I've written down here, they actually come from that little book at the top of the page called the Physician's Desk Reference. Every doctor has a physician's desk reference, if not in a book form anymore, online, and they can actually look up all of the unwanted effects that you may get from taking progestins or progestogens. And if you look through that list of undesirable side effects, what's really scary about that list is that a lot of those undesirable side effects are exactly the same kinds of symptoms that we were looking at earlier for women and men whose hormones are out of balance. So you really don't want to be using a synthetic progestogen or progestin in your system, because it's only going to highlight the hormonal imbalance that you're already experiencing. So can we go to the next slide? Thanks, Heather. So what's causing this imbalance, this thing that we call estrogen dominance, where estrogen is weighing down our systems and we simply don't have enough progesterone in our system? Let's have a look at the next slide and we can look at some of the causes. So, you know, this is a conversation that's very dear to my heart and very much connected to Modere. There are chemicals that are in our cosmetics, chemicals that are in our bathrooms, chemicals that are in our cleaning products, in our laundries, in our kitchens. All of those chemicals, sorry, not all of those chemicals, all of those products have chemicals in them that actually are endocrine disrupting chemicals. That means that they are chemicals that produce xenoestrogens that act on our bodies in negative ways. Can we go to the next slide, please, Heather? Also, we get lots of xenoestrogens from our food. So there are cosmetic chemicals that are being used in fast food. There are herbicides and pesticides that contain xenoestrogens, and they're being sprayed on all of the fresh produce that we're purchasing. And those chemicals have exactly the same effect in your body as your natural estrogen does, but they come with a whole pile of negative side effects which show up as all those symptoms we've been looking at. Next slide, thanks, Heather. So we're still going to be looking at food, and looking at food, we're looking at animals now. So we're looking at the normal grass-fed cow, and you can just see the different size of the udder, and you can see the different shape of the cow, and you'll see it on the next slide as well, where animals are being fed growth hormones hormones and antibiotics that are actually affecting their hormonal balance and therefore ours. When we eat the cow or we drink the milk, we end up with those hormones in our systems. And those cans that you can see there on the side, even when you're buying an organic can of, what did I have the other day, red kidney beans or something like that, when you open up a can and you can see that white lining on the bottom of the can or on the two on the outside, or you can see the lining completely inside that middle can, that white lining is actually emitting estrogen, xenoestrogens into the contents of the can, and then lucky us, we get to eat those. Next slide, thanks Heather. You see this with the chicken, you know, a naturally grown chicken versus a chicken that's been grown with hormones. You can see the difference in the size of the birds. And, you know, that's why we're looking at things like precocious puberty, is because lots and lots and lots of little girls just love their red rooster and their Kentucky fried and all the chicken that mum's bringing home and making for meals, you know, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. And if those chicken have been treated with xenoestrogens to make them grow faster, that's what's happening to our little girls. They are being forced to grow faster as well because they're being exposed to the same kinds of estrogens through the food chain. Next slide, thanks, Heather. Oops, that went backwards. Oops, that's going backwards more. One more. Next slide, please. Beautiful. So, you know, again, if you're looking at hormones in food as being undesirable, what you need to also realise that there are a lot of lifestyle-related hormones that somehow have become acceptable. So many of us are on oral contraceptive pills or hormone replacement therapy. Those kinds of pharmaceuticals are the things that contain all those synthetic progesterones or progestins and progestogens that I said are not good for us. Similarly with condoms, all of those are lubricated with a thing called nonylphenol, and nonylphenol is also a xenoestrogen. So again, it's having that influence on your body's balance of hormones. Just another thing that's not there on the slide is whenever you're handling till receipts that are plasticized, so I don't know if you remember what the fax rolls used to be like, any paper that feels plasticized, it's that plasticization that is actually rubbing off onto your skin and giving you another dose of xenoestrogens. So we have the next slide, thanks Heather. And plastic is a huge issue for us. Plastic is taking over our world. You look at storage containers that are in plastic, you look at cling wrap, you look at the water that we're drinking. Plastic is everywhere, and plastic is one of the biggest culprits in adding to our xenoestrogen overload. Next slide, thanks Heather. So at the bottom of all of this is petrochemicals. Anything made from petrochemicals, which includes a lot of those things that are being turned into plastic, a lot of those things that are being used in skincare and cosmetics, a lot of those things that are being added to our food are actually byproducts from the petrochemical industry. And if you're filling up your own petrol tank, you should be standing upwind from those petrol fumes so that you're not actually absorbing those petrol fumes, because once again, it's petrol that is actually adding to our hormonal imbalance. Next slide, thanks Heather. On top of all of this, we've got stress. Now, most people are feeling very stressed, and unfortunately for us, stress robs our body of progesterone to make cortisol. So if you think back to that diagram of how the hormones are made, you need progesterone, you need DHA to make cortisol, and whenever you're stressed, your body's going to want to use cortisol to become less stressed, and so to make more cortisol, your body has to use the progesterone. So not only are we adding lots of estrogens into our system, because of the stress, we're also stealing progesterone from our system to make other hormones. Next slide, thanks Heather. So here's some tips for rescuing your hormones. We're on to the good news at last. First of all, you need to decrease your known sources of exposure to xenoestrogens, the bad estrogens. Secondly, you need to increase your levels of phytoestrogens, the good estrogens. And third, increase your levels of progesterone so that you can get things back into balance. Thanks, Heather. The next slide. So what can I do? Well, here is the perfect way to decrease xenoestrogens, the most easy and simple way you're ever going to find. Become a 100% user of the Modere product range. So what I've shown you here is the Essentials collection, the home care products, the skincare products, and of course the latest and greatest anti-aging product ever invented is Modere ID. The thing about Modere is none of our products contain over 3,000 toxic chemicals, and of that 3,000 toxic chemicals, we're talking about these hormone-disrupting xenoestrogens. So you know when you swap brands to Modere, you're going to be significantly reducing your daily exposure to these xenoestrogens that are wreaking havoc on your hormonal balance. Next slide, thanks, Heather. What you can also do, as I said earlier, is you need to increase your phytoestrogens and also increase your progesterone. So with Modere, we have two different collections. We have collection one is for the reproductive years to help balance your hormones, and collection two down the bottom is for the transitional years to help you transition from being in that place of reproductive to going through menopause. So each of these collections actually have products in them. They have the essentials, and collection one has balance, and those two products will actually help to increase your level of phytoestrogen. So that effectively, even though it sounds like you're adding more estrogen to your body, because phytoestrogens are so much weaker, you're in essence diluting the overall effect, because the phytoestrogens will go into the receptor site, and therefore there's no place for the xenoestrogens that you may still be being exposed to find a home. Similarly, in the transitional collection 2 product, you've got the essentials and then you've got transitions, and they're very similar, but they are specifically designed for whether you're going through your reproductive or going through your transitional years. And then both of the collections have the balancing cream, because that's the cream that actually gives your body everything that it needs to be able to increase its own production of progesterone. It's food for your hormones. It's a fantastic cream. And by using the balancing cream, you can actually naturally increase your body's own levels of progesterone. And of course, what you need to do is make sure that you're eating clean food that's organic and drinking clean water that's filtered. Meditate and take time out for yourself to de-stress. You also need to sleep well. Avoid everything made from petrochemicals wherever possible. Avoid medications that have hormone disrupting side effects, and exercise. If we could have the next slide, thanks, Heather. Becoming healthy is not a single item. I always say that it's a layered experience. So you've got to do all of those things over time to keep yourself nice and healthy. So the other things you can do is add minerals in. If you look at that picture on the side, the blue writing that you can see, all of those are actually enzymes that actually need minerals to make them work. So if you don't have minerals in your system, you won't actually be able to produce those enzymes that therefore help the interaction between the progesterone and the DHEA to make all the other hormones that you need. Next slide, thanks, Heather. And here are a few extra special tips. These 3 products are known as the anti-aging trio. It's colostrum, it's muscle and bone health, and it's Mexican wild yam. And those 3 products contain ingredients that research tells us work on helping to keep hormonal levels at as young a level as possible. Aging is about the decline of our hormonal system, and if you're looking for anti-aging, you want to make sure that you keep all of your hormonal systems as healthy as possible. Next slide, thanks, Heather. Prostate health, fantastic for men, obviously, with prostate problems. Next slide, thanks, Heather. And these products for stress. So stress health and well-being both contain ingredients that have been shown to be excellent at countering stress and nourishing the adrenal system. Next slide, thanks, Heather. And finally, the Hawaiian noni. If you look at the diagram here, what you see at the top is the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, the thyroid, the parathyroids, the thymus, the adrenals, the pancreas, the ovaries, and the testes. All of those hormones are controlled by the regulator gland, the master gland. And the pineal gland is a very dark-coloured little gland inside of our brain. And interestingly, noni is a very dark-coloured juice from the Hawaiian noni plant. And there's lots of research that says the ingredients in Hawaiian noni can actually help to stimulate the pineal, which then flows down to all of the other hormonal producing glands inside of our bodies. Next slide, thanks Heather. So what are other people saying? Well, right beside me I've got Rona, and she's going to tell you some of the experiences that she's had with some of the hormone products. Thanks, Rona.
Hi everybody, thanks Julie. So look, I had a great customer experience with the Mexican wild yam. It made such a positive difference to me. I'd been struggling with a raft of weird and quite disparate ailments. For example, anxiety, foggy thinking. My calf muscles were so tight when I woke up in the morning and I had to stretch them for ages to be able to move. I also had this awful sensation of pinpricks in my elbows, like thousands of pinpricks at a time, and that was combined with extreme exhaustion. It was just totally awful. The only way I could stop it was, which was that sensation, was to go to sleep, so life wasn't too great. I'd had blood tests done prior to this and I was told I was fabulously healthy. Probably because I was already taking the antioxidant, the mineral drink, and the adult multivitamin. But one day a chemist in my business said maybe I should get checked to see if I had fibromyalgia, as it was a non-specific condition, and she suggested that I exhibited several of the many symptoms. Luckily, I'd heard some info about the Mexican wild yam, and I decided to try it. So, look, I took 2 tablets twice a day, and after only 4 days, it was amazing. The fog lifted. I had amazing energy. My elbows didn't hurt, and I wasn't fatigued. It's like somebody had flipped a switch. So, and I also felt a lot calmer, and I got my happy back. So I was really, really thankful that somebody had shared that information with me. So that's my little customer experience. Natalie, over to you.
Thanks, Rona. Hi, everyone. I just want to say before Modere, I was in chronic pain with my period, with back pain, mood swings, migraines. I was bedridden often for a couple of days prior and during my period. I was placed on the pill as a young girl, but then along came the Modere collection. The Health Collection 1 is what I was taking, along with the balancing cream. And of course I changed over my essentials collection as well, cleaned out my bathroom. So what I found with that, I was very lucky. 2 weeks after using these nutritionals, I got my period and I didn't know it was coming. So it was wonderful not to have any of those side effects affect my life. I have a 14-year-old daughter who is now, of course, using Modere, and luckily for her, along came her period with no pains whatsoever. However, if we have been exposed to doing our nails 1-2 often times during the month and haven't been upping our balancing cream, we definitely get those side effects back again. Also, we ran out of firewood and we decided to put in another heater to warm us, and that was a kerosene heater, and what we found is that we unfortunately had those side effects back again, a little bit moody and back pains. So just be very wary of your environment. If something starts to affect you again, have a look at what's going on in your environment. Yeah, so thank you very much, and off to you, Tony. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Tony.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic job, Julie, as always. Awesome presentation. Look, I just wanted to share with you 2 powerful experiences. One is a friend in her late 70s. She started to use a balancing cream and Mexican white yam and antioxidants well into her 70s. At the age of 19, she was diagnosed with arthritis. By 45, after a lot of stress, she had full-blown rheumatoid arthritis. She had 2 hip replacements, the second one to try and correct the first botched-up job. That was 6 years prior to me introducing her to our product. She had both her hands done, all the fingers, all the joints done twice. She had 3 operations on her feet. The last one, where they broke all her toes again, she called herself a bionic woman. She was on a number of very, very strong painkillers, on strong hormone patches, which made, as she said, her boobs so sore that she felt she was coming into milk. She had hot flushes. This is at the age of 70 plus, can you imagine? Her last op was on her feet when she finally decided to give our products a go. And that operation had been done 7 months prior. Her feet were still totally swollen. They were black. She could barely walk. And all she could put on was slippers and barely walk. After she started using the balancing cream, she rang me 3 days later and she said, Tony, I need some more. She said, I don't ever want to be without these products again. She said the swelling had gone down, the bruising was gone, she could walk. And then, so she came to me, this is 4 days after. It was remarkable. She then started on the YDM tablets and the antioxidant tablets. 4 months later, she was walking 3 kilometres with her husband, who'd had a bypass done. She had gone back to playing bowls, which was her love. When I asked her how often, she said up to 4 times a week. Now, this is a person who had aches all over her body, and she just couldn't do anything. When she came to me the first time, or rather when she started to use the YDM, balancing cream, I said to her to put it on where she saw, and this is where she used them up in 3 days because her whole body was aching. So after that, she was able to reduce it. But like I say, 4 months later, she was a new person. It was just remarkable. And the second one is my own story, just very quickly. I had fibrocystic breast all my life. Didn't know I had them because that's all I ever had. It's like you said, when you think something's normal, that's it. And then I started getting extra lumps. Well, they turned out to be lumps that I had to have biopsies and mammograms and everything. One nasty one where I had to have an operation, sign a piece of paper, not knowing what body parts are going to be missing when I come out of it. Then I started on the balancing cream, and no more fibrocystic breast, no more lumps in the breast, and no woman should ever be without those products.
Thank you so much, Tony. I think people get the gist that these products are incredible and they bring about amazing results. Thanks, Tony. Thanks. Can we have the next slide, please, Heather? So finally, just to wrap up, in the world that we live in today, it's easy to become hormonally imbalanced. The great news, there are simple things we can be aware of at any age that restore that balance and return us to good health. We all have hormones. They naturally change with age. Change is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I wish you happy hormones from now on. Thanks, everybody. That's the end of tonight's webinar, but we've got a promo for next webinar. We can have the next slide. Thanks, Heather. Thank you for attending this webinar, Know the Brand Modere Live Clean. On Wednesday, April the 27th, we have the amazing Tim McGill on at 8 p.m. I'll hand you over to Tim. Thanks, Tim.
Oh, Julie, thanks so much. Firstly, I wanted to just say how awesome that webinar was. I learnt an unbelievable amount of information from you tonight, so a huge thank you from not only myself but all the people that I'm with tonight for the amazing information you shared. It was really, really good. And also to the ladies who shared their testimonies from using the products. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to be very brief about what I'm going to share in a couple of weeks' time, I should say. We all know that, well, from the information that we got tonight about the damage that these endocrine disrupting chemicals can do once they're in our body, it's very important not only to balance the hormones, but it's equally as important to be able to detoxify these endocrine disrupting chemicals once they're in our body. So I'm going to show you some information which is related to how these harmful ingredients, once they get into our body, the illnesses and the diseases that they can cause if they are not expelled from our body through effective detoxification over time, and how most of these diseases are preventable. But I'm also going to run you through how the weight management system, the awesome weight management system that my dear has, is designed to effectively help these harmful nasties, which can come in the form of not only xenoestrogens, but also obesogens, call them whatever you like, but it's very important to get them out of the body. So I'm going to choose 3 to 4 of the most effective products in our weight management system that are going to give you a better understanding of how daily use of these products can prevent these harmful ingredients from doing damage to our bodies, if not detoxified from our systems over time. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you again, Julie, for your excellent webinar tonight and the plethora of information that you gave everyone tonight. We're all fully armed with how good these products are, and yeah, let's get on the site and order up, people, and I'll see you in a fortnight.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.